Oh hi, I didn't see you there. My name is Bliss Foster. Welcome back to the Margiela series where we're exploring every single runway show that Martin Margiela produced at his eponymous house. We find ourselves today in spring-summer 2004. This show took place at the Museum of Modern Art of the city of Paris, but most fashion fans know that by the building's name, which is the Palais de Tokyo. If this isn't ringing any bells, this is where all the Rick Owens shows happen. They happen outside in the courtyard behind the building. It's also where like 30 or 40% of all Fashion Week shows happen currently in Paris. This is my personal favorite building in Paris, and it is where the Maison has finally found itself. The Palais was going through renovations at that point, so guests had to enter through a side entrance that was covered in graffiti. I wish we had images of that, but we don't. Once again, the Maison does a variation on their runway format of introducing the looks one at a time. We remember that this is done so that the baggage of, "This is a runway show," can be diffused. Introducing outfits in this way hopefully makes it where guests will appreciate them more as clothing primarily, rather than focusing on the spectacle of it being a runway show. One moment, please.
Hi, folks. Now, I know what you're thinking. How could this guy, Bliss, get any cooler? I just landed an interview as a shift manager at an ice cream store. So, I don't know. Sounds like there's a bit of a competition here. Place your votes. All right. Love ya. Get wet!
Jeez, I'm so sorry about that, folks. Hey, look, if you want to watch the entire Margiela series, like all of the episodes, and see the entire episodes and not just these clipped public versions, you should join the Patreon. We're not just plugging the Patreon anymore, folks. It's a entertaining part of the episode. Please, folks, please join my Patreon. Back to it. The soundtrack for this show actually tells us something pretty funny about Martin as a person. It was all like the diva-style 70s disco hits. And in keeping with that theme, we have a very Margiela take on that era of glamour. Many fashion historians and critics cite the 1970s as the golden era of modern fashion. Andre Leon Talley's autobiography certainly seemed to pitch the 70s as the absolute height of fashion. And it's really funny because as much as Martin seems to be using his platform within fashion to kind of criticize or point out flaws in the fashion system or in just clothes generally, he seems to be doing a pretty low-key ode to this era of fashion here. Or at least to this era of glamour. I don't know if it's like the fashion so much because this is still very distinctly his look, but the jewelry especially sort of seems to identify this as kind of a very precious era to Martin personally. We remember that Martin's career is kind of based on criticizing the type of glamour from the 80s. The big shoulders, the kind of unachievable, glowing, angelic, rich girl type beauty, but apparently the 70s are fair game for him. He seems to really love them. And that does kind of make sense. Martin would have turned 13 in 1970. So these were kind of the most formative years of his life and sort of the period when he was developing his aesthetic taste. But critics at the time were really confused by this collection. Some even guessed that the helm of avant-garde might need to be taken up by some younger designer. Which, joke's on them, this was just a slow season. Martin continued to make great stuff for the next few years. So you might be able to guess that there is some discussion in the contrast between the front and the back of an outfit. We can see that done most obviously in the tabbies, which are split at the sides so that there's one color in the front, one color in the back, and that's also reflected in the tights, which are bisected by color, so there's one in the front and one in the back. Focusing on the front is seen in other elements of the presentation as well, most obviously in that the hair is teased and brushed all the way to the front. We can even see that the back of their hair is tied up to make up for all of the hair that couldn't be pushed all the way forward to the front. But by focusing on the front, that doesn't necessarily mean that the back is being ignored here. Some of the tops look as though they're constructed in a way that you'd expect to be relatively normal, or with the expectation of seeing a full back. But when the model turns around, it's an entirely backless top, held by thin ribbons around the neck or connected at the base of the neck in some of the product. And this looks really purposeful here. This season seems to essentially be an exercise for the Maison, where the prompt is focus only on the front of clothes and let's see what we can learn. Unfortunately, that means that there's not a lot of like symbolism or latent meaning in this collection. It's just kind of an exercise that they were doing as a group. And that's okay. By the way, if anybody does have a reading on this season, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Please feel free to go into as much detail as you want. I read all of the comments. But do you remember back in spring-summer 2002, the Maison adopted a few different techniques for presenting clothes? They had like ones that were the circle, they had another one that was the folds, and that was by far the coolest one. And if I remember correctly, I said at the time that that technique could have been a whole season all on its own. Well, we see a continuation of the folded technique here in this one. And what's interesting to note here is that I'm not reading ahead. I'm actually learning about these seasons in order with you all. Like I'm doing them one or maybe two seasons at a time. Anyway, the lookbook images feature a descriptive text that gives us more context to how these clothes were made. Like, quote, a length of white crepe folded to evoke a two-piece suit, and this one that says, quote, elasticated tulle folded to evoke a dress with a waistcoat, etc., etc. This season is important for a number of different reasons. One of those reasons being that this was the year that the Maison moved into the headquarters that they just recently moved out of. It was a Sisters of Charity convent for a number of years, and then it was purchased and became a school of industrial design, and then the Maison moved in. They literally just, here in 2022, they just moved out of this headquarters. I've been there a couple of times. It is a absolutely beautiful location, and it will be very badly missed. Anyway, that's totally anecdotal. Moving on. Before we wrap up the public version of this episode, I want to read a short essay by Vanessa Beecroft about the Maison and what it means to her. We've had some shorter episodes lately, and that's just because I'm just saying what I see. I'm trying not to add in any fluff or any forced content into this kind of stuff, so I figure we could use a little bit longer episode this time. So we're going to keep looking at footage from this season and read the beautiful words of Vanessa Beecroft. Beauty comes with the threat of its end, the tacit knowledge that it won't last forever. We have a problem with this, and we get caught in the illusion of never-ending beauty. Maison Martin Margiela is candid about beauty. Its beauty comes with faults, burns, rips, memories of the past, dreams, tragedy. This beauty is surreal, asymmetrical, has no gender, it has no status. It is not sexist, it is not luxury, it's not money, it is not class. It's white, it's black, and it's a replica, not a false reinterpretation. When we own a Maison Martin Margiela piece, we attach to something that looks as if it has already undergone life and lost those elements that introduce the illusion of the everlasting. This garment is conceptually permanent because its temporary quality is part of its look. It's a picture of life after the fact, even before it happened. What moves me most is that this tear or burn or misfit feels unique, as if it were custom made for me. That is taken from the Maison Martin Margiela book. This one, I've had to cut it up a whole bunch in order to make this series work. So like all of these are essentially like loose leaf little things in here. Oh, it just occurred to me that I'm sure the lighting completely messed up when that all-white book came into frame. Hey, go join the Patreon so that you can watch the full extended episodes. We still have a shit ton to cover because there was a lot of product from this season. We're just about halfway done here. Go join it up, support the channel, watch the full extended episodes, watch all the exclusive videos, the extra Margiela stuff, the extra stuff having to do with the other things that I cover. I love you all a lot. I mean it. Goodbye.